Today, we'll learn the active and passive sentences for the verb time simple. There are 4 rules concerning the passive usage. First, distinguishing between passive and active sentences. Next, the uses and problems of using the passive tense. Then, how to structure the passive. And finally, the simple verb times. Let's look at these individually. How to tell if a sentence is active or passive. An active sentence focuses on the person. In this case, it's John. John cooked the egg. John is the focus and the subject of our sentence. But with a passive sentence, it does not focus on the person. It focuses on the object. So, instead of John cooked the egg, we get the egg was cooked by John. We've taken the focus away from John and put it on the egg. And we even don't need John at all because John is understood or implied. So we could simply say, the egg was cooked. We know that John cooked it, but the emphasis is on the eggs. Now, the passive use is a bit tricky. It's used for a lot of different things, like impersonal writing, formal, traditional, and scientific writing. Things that are a little bit higher echelon. The problems with the passive is that it can be very difficult to read. It makes longer sentences, and it can often be a bit unclear. So, use active sentences whenever possible. Let's look at the structure of passive sentences. If we have an active sentence, we have subject, verb, and then the object. For instance, John, which is our subject, kicked, which is our verb, the ball, our object. S-V-O. John kicked the ball. But with a passive sentence, the object and the subject are switched. So, instead of John kicked the ball, the focus is now on the ball. The ball was kicked by John. Object, verb, subject. Let's look at that a little bit more in depth. How to write a passive sentence. With our active sentence, John kicks the ball, all we do is switch the subject and the object, John and the ball, and add a form of be. So, in this example, we get the ball is kicked by John. The ball is the object, it comes to the beginning. Is kicked is the verb, which stays in the same place, but we add is as a part of the verb be. And John is at the end because the subject and the object have been switched. So, the ball is kicked by John. Let's look at the simple verb time in the present, past, and the future. In the present tense, an active sentence would look like this. John washes the dishes. John is our subject and the dishes are our object. Again, the focus is on John, so it comes first and it's our active sentence. But if we want to put the focus on the dishes, this is what it would look like. The dishes are washed by John. We've switched around the dishes and John and added are, the helper verb from be, to our sentence. John washes the dishes becomes, in the present tense, the dishes are washed by John. Okay? In the past tense, it's the same concept. John, which is our subject, washed, now the same verb, just in the past tense, the dishes, our object. We switch the dishes with John, and the dishes come first. Then, in order to make it past tense, we have to change the helper verb be into the past tense with the dishes. So we get the dishes were washed by John. Again, subject, verb, object becomes object, verb with a helper verb, subject. If we want to do the future with will, it's a similar thing. We start with this John for the for the active sentence. John will wash in the future, the dishes. Subject, verb, object. To have the passive, we switch the subject and the object around. We begin with dishes. Then we use the form of be that goes in the future, which is will be. The dishes will be washed by John. So you can see we've added it into the future, we've used the helper, and we've switched around the object and the subject. John will wash the dishes becomes the dishes will be washed by John. All right, let's review our 4 rules. First, we talked about distinguishing between passive and active. An active sentence focuses on the subject, and the passive focuses on the object. Then, we talked about the uses and the problems of passive. We don't like to use passive that much because it's very problematic. But it can be useful in scientific writing and things of that nature. Then we talked about how to structure the passive. It's basically just switching around the subject and the object and using the helper verb be with the verb. Then we talked about some simple verb times. We switch around the subject and the object, and we use the helper verb in the appropriate time, just to make our passive sentences. All right, it's your turn. Will you do the exercises?